Ladies and gentlemen, he has done it again. Of course, I'm talking about the absolute magic that Magnus Carlsen works onto his opponents during his chess games. Two of Magnus's greatest strengths as a player are his stamina and his ability to put sustained pressure all throughout into the endgame. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how he just did exactly that. Magnus is currently playing in the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour. This is the second tour event of the 2025 season. They're in Paris, France. His opponent in the knockouts is Nodirbek Abdusattorov, last-minute replacement for Hans Niemann. And I will remind you, we haven't heard from Hans Niemann at all, if you're following the day-to-day. If you're just watching this video because it was recommended to you, sit back, relax, and enjoy. I will try to provide as much context as possible. So, the way this format works is that before the game, the players draw a random position, and then they can analyze the position with other players who are playing with the white pieces. Arjun Erigaisi, Magnus Carlsen, Vincent Keimer. These are all of your matchups. I will show you Hikaru Arjun next. I will show you Jan versus Keimer as well. MVL versus Fabiano Caruana, etc. Now, we are going to kick things off in this game. All right, this was a d4 game. And, in this format, you castle by clearing out the space of the pieces. For white to castle that way, white would need to move the queen, the bishop, and the knight. Nodirbek plays the move f5. So we have a Dutch defense as far as the first two moves go, but obviously everything is completely different. Black is fighting for the center without putting anything there. Black is unable to put the knight behind the pawn because black doesn't have a knight on the home square, right? Magnus now plays f3, all right? And obviously the idea is quite simple. He just wants to play the move e4. Nodirbek has multiple moves at his disposal. He plays g5. Now, the interesting thing about this matchup is that 2 months ago in February of 2025, these guys played against each other as well. They played in the knockout of the previous edition of this tournament, and Magnus won quite convincingly in that tournament. So we have e4. We have exactly what we are preparing for. And now in this position, Nodirbek decides not to take the pawn. He brings out one of his knights. He's ready to recapture with the rook and either bring the rook back or maybe even rotate it somewhere to generate some sort of attack. We also have this knight coming to the middle. Generally, knights that start on the corners of the board are not particularly good. You should try to bring them to the center. Knight d6. The goal is to induce Magnus to come forward and potentially get tangled up with the pieces. The big question here is, does white want to advance in the center? When you advance your pawns in chess like this, it could be good, but it also could be a bit dangerous because you get closer to your opponent, and if you're close to your opponent, they can very easily trade off your pawns. Just like a boxing match. Minus the pawns. b3, e5. So now we just have, we have total chaos. White can take this pawn, or can ignore both. White can take this pawn and that pawn. White can also just, take one but not the other. After some thought, Magnus opts to lock the position. He decides that, this is the best chance at keeping a level of stability, predictability. The knight standing there could potentially be a target for his c-pawn if he chooses to advance it in the future. And we don't know yet whether Nodirbek is going to castle this way, castle the long distance way to the right side of the board, whether Nodirbek is going to attack. The thing about this format is that since you don't know where one of the sides is going to commit the king, it's really difficult to launch any form of an attack. From the opening, it was actually black who had an advantage in this game. He has to try to capitalize on it, and Nodirbek plays h5. This is really a Nodirbek type of move. 4 of his pawns are on their home squares, and 4 have been moved up together, all two ranks forward, which is very fascinating. Now, that pawn looks like it's hanging. If knight takes h5 were to be played in this position, you would lose stability of the center, and after pawn takes e4, there would be a rook trade, and obviously this would be slightly problematic. So you cannot take the pawn on h5. c4. Look at this. As promised, right? Signed, sealed, delivered. Look at this. c5. Maybe we're going to put the bishops behind the pawns. So the pawns lead the way. We gain space. We lock up the position. We defend each other. Everything is well coordinated. And then the bishops are going to come next. h4. Baiting Magnus into something. Magnus probably has to take the pawn on f5. If he goes backwards, he's just going to lose the pawn on e4. So he does. Knight takes, pawn takes, and now, rather than taking with the rook and letting it become a target, Nordebek shows poise, control, patience. He's going to take back with the knight if white tries to defend himself with the move g4. Luckily, in chess, we have something called the en passant rule. So far, nothing too brilliant for Magnus. The game is developing. We're going to reach a level of stability in the position, and then I'm going to show you what separates him from the other players of this generation, of the next generation, and just in general. Like, Nordebek is the 6th ranked player in the world. The billion people who play chess, he's number 6. All right, let's see what the difference is. Knight e2, knight takes f5, bishop c2, and now Magnus is going to commit his king. He ultimately decides it's not worth the hassle to get all these pieces out of the way. Plus, Nordebek is already kind of lurking. It would not really make a lot of sense to put the king there. We're going to put the king just like this. Pawn wall is strong. Maybe black is going to try to break it apart. Maybe, maybe not. Now we need to decide what else is incoming. a5 is the best move here to try to create some sort of an attack. Nordebek plays b6. Now Magnus plays another good move. h3. Just a waiting move. h3 doesn't look like anything special. It's the top move of the computer. Top move. Why? Controlling g4. So by playing h3, he shuts down the pawn play on one side of the board. He just understands chess. Doesn't matter if you shuffle the first row of pieces. It is the best move because now you are limiting black's play. Maybe you'll play g4, maybe you'll play g3, but more than anything else, you're going to wait. Bishop g6. Again, Magnus understands the best square to put his pieces. Do you put your bishop on c3? d2 to target this pawn. c3 to target that one, somewhere. This is the best move for the bishop. The bishop belongs on the f2 square. You control the black knight from ever infiltrating. You have eyes on b6, so if black ever tries to advance, you have eyes over there, and maybe you'll even support an attack. Black plays bishop f6, also understanding the position very well. Magnus plays top computer move. Rook e1. I don't even get this move. You know why? That's the best move. Black in some lines sometimes wants to go knight to d4. This is ready to infiltrate on the e-file if necessary. And also, if you put your bishop on the e4 square, your rook will protect it. This is again the best move. And this is again the best move. So for the last few moves from here, castling was fine. This is the best move in the position to limit your opponent's play. This is the best move in the position to limit your opponent's play. This is the best move in the position to limit your opponent's play and also to defend yourself. And this is the best move in the position to coordinate your pieces perfectly. Literally, if you look at Stockfish, it's like top move, top move, top move. Queen, and pawn goes to a5 now. You have to improve the knight. Magnus plays chess like we solve puzzles. Just think about that for a second. In chess, it looks like you have an ocean of possibilities. Every move, right? And then ultimately the AI is the judge. When you solve a puzzle, you take the puzzle, you go, what goes there? You fit, and then one piece fits in place. That's how this dude plays chess. Everything is on the optimal square. White's position has now been fully optimized. Fully optimized. Nordebek creating counterplay with knight d4. Now there are several ways to proceed. Stockfish doesn't particularly love this trade, but it doesn't hate it either. What is the point of Magnus's play? Look at how he sneakily did this. Magnus put 7 pawns on light squares. That means the light squares are rock solid. Black has 7 pawns on dark squares. That means black's dark squares are rock solid. But you should not have the bishop of the same color. And suddenly, we see exactly that. We see the bishop and the 7 light square pawns with the bishop and the 7 dark square pawns. So now, forever, Magnus will have an advantage. Forever. Now it's just a matter of, will he demonstrate the necessary technique to win this game? And how is he going to do it? How do you win a position like this? Do you make a pawn break? What do? Do you attack? Do you make some trades? What do you do? Well, first you avoid opening the position. Your opponent was trying to open up your king. Despite being a little bit destabilized now, that is a weakness, right? We just wait. Bishop g7, now queen f1. Now we start bringing in the queen, all right? I think that was his first queen move of the game, by the way, 21 moves. a3, centralizing the queen. Perfection. Now, At some point, this knight has to be taken because it's black's literal only hope. So we take the knight. Here's something crazy about this position. Want something completely nuts? You don't need to take this pawn. If you take this pawn, you will allow counterplay. Okay, so we just move the king. Now g4 is not a check, right? Yeah, now we're going to take the pawn next. Yep, g4. Now we take. Noderbek looking for some sort of counterplay. Noderbek can play bishop e3 now. But guess what? Then white would play rook f1. You gave white a pawn. It's not really clear what you've sort of earned back for this pawn. So what does Noderbek do? He senses that there could be something brewing over there. He castles. Because that's how you castle in this format. I understand. It's just a different type of chess. Don't get stressed. Now Magnus plays rook e2. He is still not taking this pawn. He's not taking the forbidden fruit. He doesn't want to give Noderbek anything. Rook e8. Noderbek plays bishop e3. Knight back to d2, offering a trade of queens. Queen f7. Targeting the pawn on d5 and looking for counterplay. And now watch how Magnus puts everything together. Plays b5. b5 does a few things. It stops black from moving any pawn. Black officially has no pawn moves remaining. Almost literally, by the way. This is the only pawn move, and of course it would get taken. So now we begin the trading process. Noderbek doesn't have anything else. He also has a minute versus 13. To Noderbek's credit, he comes up with very creative counterplay. Queen f1. In general, if you are losing in chess, you have to create chaos. You have to go for the opponent's king, even if it means weakening your own. But Magnus here is like a precision sushi chef. Everything is cut perfectly. Everything is put perfectly, like a science. Check. Takes a pawn with check. Gives another check. Gives another check. Gives another check. He's not repeating moves. He is putting the queen on the exact square it needs to be to return back to the best square at home. When Noderbek moves the queen to the other side of the board to join forces with the b-pawn, Magnus just right. King b3. Everything fits in like a puzzle piece. Everything. And now when his king is running to the edge of the board, there is no check. Every square is protected. Rook f1 counterplay. Rook d2 defending. King takes the a3 pawn. Now Magnus is up 3 pawns in an endgame. Runs his king up to a4. And look at this. You attack my queen. I attack your queen. Both of our queens will perish together while I defend my king. You have to go here. Once again, the best move. And here Noderbek has to find d3, but after rook c3, it's not really clear what's going on. It also is just a winning position. This would have been the only hope to try to get something like this. But after rook a3, it simply looks hopeless. It looks like you are going to trade all the pieces here. King b4, you cannot give another check because the king escapes and I block. So Noderbek goes here, and now Magnus cleans it up. Trades the rooks, wins some pawns. And Noderbek keeps playing a little bit just in case Magnus, malfunctions. But it's over. And Magnus just walks the king over, starts advancing his pawns, and here Noderbek resigns. It's one of the most flawless freestyle chess games I've ever seen. From this position, Magnus got settled. And that was it. It was never a battle after that. He just won this game, pure positional and endgame pressure. Now, let's keep in mind what the opening looked like, because it's very interesting to see what happens in other openings. In this game, Arjun started with the move e4. In this game, we had d4. Erigaisi versus Hikaru. This is one of the knockouts. And Hikaru played f5. Pawn takes f5, and now rather than taking with the rook, which would have just regained the pawn, he plays a gambit. He gives away a second pawn. So he's just a pawn down. 3 moves have gone by. Hikaru has 6 pawns to Arjun's 7. Now, the crazy thing about this is that Hikaru gave an interview after the game was over, and he said this was not even his idea. This was Jan Nepomniachtchi's idea, who played against Vincent Keimer, but Vincent started with d4, just like Magnus started. So he wasn't able to use this. And here's something funny. Look at this game. Maxime and Fabiano played a very similar opening, but the pawn was not taken, right? So the pawn was not taken. We have other games. We have games in the, obviously in the other side of everything, but I mean, Report, Gukesh, these guys are playing for 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. You know, they started with their own stuff over there. 9th, 10th, 11th place, like the bottom 2, the bottom 4, they always go for some wild stuff because they're out of the running. They kind of want to freestyle a little bit, no pun intended. Now, in this game, Eric Icey tried to catch up with the development, and Hikaru went wrong pretty early. This allowed Eric Icey to put significant pressure early in the opening, simply protect his pawn, jump in with the knight, and have a borderline crushing position. Eric Icey was doing really, really well. I mean, you give a guy an extra pawn, it's going to be, you're not an engine. It's going to be kind of hard. And Queen F2, knight here, and right around this moment was the biggest advantage of the opening. I mean, Eric Icey got an extra pawn, and he was just beating Hikaru. Just beating him over, you know, progressing slowly into his territory and having a lot of pressure. And now he just has to convert it. He has to do the right thing in this position, right? Not to spoil anything. We'll see. We'll see if that happens. He goes knight up. He goes bishop b3 first. Allows Hikaru to get a little bit of counterplay. And now he starts going wrong. Hikaru starts getting very clutch here. He plays rook g1, queen g1, centralizes his bishop, and launches counterplay. Out of nowhere, Hikaru's doing just fine. Totally different position than this one, whereby like the 20th move, you know, Magnus had a very solid blockade, a bind. Here the position is nonsense. I mean, you got like a, you know, Oreo cookie over here of pieces. Ice cream sandwich, if you will. Both guys have left their king and their rook. They can't even like castle. I think black can castle actually, but can black castle here? Yeah, but you would lose a rook, which is kind of hilarious. But a5, and suddenly Hikaru is the one putting the pressure. All right. So we have bishop a4, king a7. Eric Icey trades, and all of a sudden, Eric Icey, who started this game up a pawn, is in a much worse position. And Hikaru is winning. He's just winning. He can bring his rook to put pressure. And the computer evaluates it at -3. Just a little bit of patience, centralizing some of the pieces, and then at the right moment, taking and breaking through. Hikaru takes right away. And this trade allows white to catch up and come back into the game, which Eric Icey immediately misses. He plays h3, but the better move would have been to trade the bishop and look for counterplay against this pawn. But obviously he has 2.5 minutes. So Hikaru puts the knight back and now goes to work. And here was maybe the final moment. Hikaru maybe could have played bishop d5 and taken the knight, but instead he does it like this. And this is the wrong set of trades because this endgame is a draw. It's just 5 pawns each. But Eric Icey couldn't sustain the pressure on Hikaru. And Hikaru played very, very well to catch up, and then he was actually better. Now he might have some chances in this endgame, but obviously, you know, even if you start in freestyle, this is just a draw. This is a rook endgame, and you know, black's rook is going to be unable to escape. White will just take the pawn, and even if, yeah, you do all of this, which is what Hikaru was doing, you do all of this, it's just not good enough because this is a draw. Hikaru tried and tried and tried, and the boys played down to a stalemate. I don't know here why Eric Icey gets a double exclamation mark, but here's an interesting thing about this game. This idea suggested by Jan Nepomniachtchi, which he ended up not playing, Hikaru gave an interview after the game and was like, around this moment, I wanted to get up and strangle Jan at the board. Which is just very funny. We need more players to open up like that in interviews. I feel like chess is a little bit too boring. Some of these guys gotta give interviews like that. That would have been crazy if Hikaru just walked over and just started choking Jan like in the middle of the round. I don't even know how that would have went down. But apparently this idea was suggested by Jan. Speaking of Jan, he won the round robin and he chose Vincent Keimer. We gotta look at this one Because even though Magnus is the best player in the world, and even if Hikaru is obviously a superstar and we got to cover it, here we have the guy that won the round robin in his first freestyle event, Jan Nepomniachtchi, versus Vincent Keimer, who literally won the first Grand Slam. So he beat Magnus and Fabi to win the first one. So it's a big deal because despite winning that first one, Jan chose him as his opponent, right? So d4, d5, knight d3, knight d6, f3, f5, totally different game, right? Playing it kind of similar to how Magnus played it, but Neuderbreck was the one that went g5. And now we get a pawn dance. h4, h6, b3, g5, a4, a5, e3, e6. So the boys move a bunch of pawns around and decide that this is the structure that they want to play in. Developing a bishop, developing a bishop, developing a knight, developing a knight. Now Vincent plays h5 to deflect the knight this way. Puts the knight there, puts the knight there. I actually really like this position for white. It looks kind of like a stonewall defense for black. Black's sort of playing like a Dutch style. Except white has a pawn here, which stops the knight. So to me, it actually looks kind of nice. Bishop c3, queen h2. And in the opening stage, it looked like Vincent was doing everything right. f4 is almost like a draw offer. Almost, because if everything gets locked up, I mean, nobody's going to win. g4, everything does get locked up. But Nepo is uninterested in making a draw. He actually starts overtaking the game. And this is a really dangerous matchup for Vincent Keimer because Vincent plays slowly. Vincent really, really takes his time. And Jan plays insanely fast. He's by far the fastest player, like, in the world. Like, his average move time is like 3 minutes. And, you know, Jan, that's sometimes good when you're putting pressure, but it's not good, you know, if the game is getting really critical and really crucial. But in this case, you know, look by the way, look at the time spent. Look at Vincent. 17, right? 17, and even 13. Look, he's going to go down 13. And now, that was move 18. This is move 25. He's still at 13. He's still at 12. Bishop e2. Okay, now he's officially dipping into that territory, but it took 12 moves, right? And no progress has been made. There is no progress being made. And now Nepo's even a pawn down. He gives up a pawn to try to create something. And, you know, Vincent gets low on time, but he's clutch, man. Now he takes over the file. Rook takes, queen g3. And they just agree to a draw. In this first game, we did not get a lot of information about these players. We really didn't. Nepo chose to play with the black pieces, which sometimes is an advantage, sometimes not. It all comes down to tomorrow. Vincent Keimer now has an opportunity to knock out Jan Nepomniachtchi, who won the round robin, after beating Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen in the previous knockouts. Which is not... And Ali Reza. I mean, Vincent showed no signs of weakness in this game. He defended himself down 50 minutes on the clock against one of the trickiest and most annoying players in the world. Jan didn't show much either. I mean, we still have a lot to learn about these two guys, so we'll see. Now, we're going to see how Maxime Vachier-Lagrave defends this gambit, or, you know, tries to play against it. He ended up not taking it. He gave Fabiano the pawn back, so we're going to get a much more peaceful game. We have a4, just like Rapport played in his game, and we will cover Gukesh, the world champion, to see what's going to happen here. Again, totally different flavor, but just like in the game of Neuderbreck, Black had an advantage in this one. And early on, I mean, it looked like MVL was just doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Fabiano, instead of putting a knight on c6 and then on b4, puts the bishop on c6. He had a bigger chance to get an advantage had that knight gone to the b4 square instead of going to the g6 square. Queen e6. And actually, after a couple more missteps, it was Maxime who had a very big advantage, drove his knight into the middle of the board, and after this trade, was putting some serious pressure. He had an opportunity here to play d4 to keep putting the advantage. He found it. Right, he's clear, and apparently queen takes was slightly, I don't even know why is this given a question mark? It's one of the game review and the stockfish are not synced. This is completely fine. The advantage is fine. And now MVL has to play queen takes b6. That pawn is free. It's dangerous to take that pawn because you would be allowing black to push to f3 and basically fully invest in this f pawn while also opening up the line to yourself. But that's the move. And Stockfish is not afraid to call a bluff. That's why Stockfish is Stockfish and we are who we are. But he takes on f4. And this allows Fabiano just enough time to trade off enough pieces that now the pawn disadvantage doesn't matter. Whereas, Had he lost the pawn like this and preserved every piece, every single piece would have been preserved, the queen would have been preserved, he would have had an advantage. But look, they traded queens, knight for bishop, and a bunch of pawns, and white's king is open. Here, the advantage is not felt. First of all, in the end of the day, opposite colored bishops, very, very high endgame drawing possibility, but also white just has a very weak c-pawn, and white has a weak king. And all those things combined allow Fabiano, despite this being freestyle chess, to very calmly get to a drawing position. And the players don't even try here. You might be like, why not? White can't make any progress. It's just not possible. Even if these pawns were traded, it would not be. It would be even more impossible because black would simply prevent the pawn from coming forward. A relatively peaceful resolution. Now, where there was no peace is the battle for 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So if you're still here, I'll serve you this dessert and then you can go along your day. Most people don't watch until 25 minutes. So if you do, let me know in the comment section what you had for breakfast today. All right? G4, G5. Knight G3. Knight G6. A4. A5. In this game, we got A4, A5 straight away. What I love about 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th is that it's total nonsense. Like, the games are all over the place because the guys can't win the main prize, so they have a little bit more fun. They do a little bit more freestyling, if you will. F5, takes, takes, F4, takes, takes. No E-pawn, no G-pawn. F-pawns are standing like this, all right? Knight to H4. Knight D4. Knight D7, rook A3, Knight T5. Knight goes to B4. Knight does a dance all the way from across the board, offering up a pawn. You can't quite take it because you might be a target over here, but Pragg goes back. And over the next few moves, Vidit gets a fantastic position. He brings every piece to life, and Pragg is on the verge of getting mated. Purely mated after less than 20 moves. Pragg plays C3, Vidit plays rook A1, hunts the king out. Look at his position. Like, the rook is basically trapped. Pragg has to go here. The bishop takes over the dark squares. Vidit is playing like a robot. I mean, he's shredding open the position. The queen is hunting down the king. The white king has literally no moves. C takes D5, and now bishop to B4. This is just an absolutely monstrous game. But as you can see there on the screen, the next move is yellow. Orange, yellow. Instead of putting his queen on B5, he should have put his queen on E7. That was the way forward, apparently. On B5, you're pinning yourself, and on E7, you kind of defend your bishop, you target the knight. That would have been the better square. Vidit has 30 seconds to make this decision. Vidit also gets into time trouble. He's done it quite a bit recently. Goes the wrong way. And now all of the advantage for black is gone because of knight C3, which attacks the queen while giving up a queen. And suddenly, black has to trade everything. This gets a fake brilliant. And suddenly, the position is just back to equal. Opposite colored bishops, just like the Fabi game. But Vidit is under time trouble. And he does sometimes tilt in the time trouble. He plays knight G6, looking for a trade. But suddenly, white is winning. Maybe not winning, but under a huge attack. Vidit goes B5. And before you know it, Pragg is up 2 pawns in an endgame. And before you know it, Pragg kicks out all the pieces, freezes Vidit's pieces like this, is about to advance, and wins the game. Over the last, 6 months, I have seen Vidit get so many good positions and not win them. And he kind of reminds me of me. Not that I would dare compare us, but I just, I feel for him because he's a monster. He got Pragg into a totally lost position. He hunted down his king, and then he didn't put the final touches. And Pragg wins this one. And the last game I have for you is Report versus the world champ Gukesh. This one, complicated. And look at this gambit. By the way, we see it again. Report also doesn't accept the gambit, instead opting for a queenless middle game against the world champion, although as it turns out, he does end up going up a pawn. And Gukesh kind of tried to win it back like this, but Report threatened an infiltration the entire time, and then he forcefully fed Gukesh the pawn, who didn't take it anyway. And then at some point, Report was like, well, if you don't want the pawn fine, you can't have it. She's going to defend it. No, and Gukesh was like, no, really, I'll take it. No more games. Knight back to d2. Report's like, no, seriously, you can't have it. Gukesh was like, well, I can take on e4. Fine, I'll castle. Report was like, you know what? I actually think it's too late to take the pawn. You can't have it, like, at all. d4 is an amazing move, by the way. d4 is brilliant. Because it looks like you're just losing a knight. But after d5, you're getting skewered. Which is kind of hilarious. Gukesh still has not won the pawn back, by the way. The pawn has just been standing there. It's been a huge battle for it. Will Gukesh finally take it? Yes, he does. But now he has to play an endgame where he's under significant pressure of the two bishops and the rooks. Report gives a check. Rook takes h7. And by the way, this is a battle of, world championship camps, right? Report was in the camp of Ding Liren in the last world championship. And now Report has to try to win this endgame. Opposite colored bishop endgames, but this one's very different. First of all, there are rooks on the board. Second of all, 2 passed pawns, right? And black has a cluster of 4 to 3, whereas white has just 2 passers. This is a very difficult endgame to defend from a practical standpoint because you have a lot of weaknesses. And also I have the outermost pawn and I have a rook. So that's really a problem for Gukesh. Report makes perfect advancements, wins the pawn, and is going to win the rest of them as well. Bishop and 3 pawns versus a rook is a win. And that is exactly how the game concludes. Very, very nice game from Report. Dare I say, if I didn't show you who was playing, you would have thought white was Magnus. Report played a beautiful game against Gukesh. And Gukesh is really, really struggling in the first two events. Last time, did he... I don't even remember what happened last time in Weissenhaus, but yeah, he really struggled. I think ultimately Ali Reza was at the bottom, but it was him and Gukesh. No, I apologize. It was Levon and Fedoseev. Aronian and Fedoseev were 9th and 10th, and last time Gukesh and Firouzja were 7th, 8th. Or however that, broke down. That's all I have for you today. Fantastic game from Magnus. Very tense game from Hikaru. Tomorrow, Magnus will try to put the final touches, sweeping Nodrubek 4-0 maybe in these preliminary in these knockouts. And yeah, tickets for the European Tour, folks. I keep talking about this every single recap. Get them while you still can. The tour begins in a month. Gonna have interviews, exhibition matches, special guests, live guests, the ELO, stand-up comedy, big productions. Tickets in the link is in the description. That's all I have for you today. Get out of here.